So thank you everybody again for joining us in the panel discussion today. So we are going to be talking all about how RevOps can navigate the key pains of CFOs and essentially better partner with the finance office. As we all know, the market has changed a lot over the last 12 months, and finance is now involved in a lot of different aspects, essentially every aspect of the business, including places that it hasn't been before. And this includes internal projects, purchases that are getting accepted across every aspect of the business, including revenue operations. And so today we've got a stellar panel that we've kind of grouped together to talk about this particular subject. And these folks have firsthand experience in dealing with this and have a lot of experience to share on how to best partner with CFOs and the finance office. So I'm going to go around the horn and kind of get folks kind of introduced. And once we get through the introductions, some of the other things that we have on the agenda for today are survey results from Eyal and the crew at DealHub. They have some results to share where they surveyed a bunch of different CFOs, and we'll be talking about the specific things that they brought up and that they mentioned in terms of their priorities, what's important to them. We're going to be talking with the crew about how to build a purchasing business case for your revenue operations projects or purchases. Within that, we're going to have some specific examples as well from Michelle and the crew on kind of how to build an effective business case using some actual real life examples. And then we're going to make sure that we leave some time for discussion and Q&A kind of at the end. But I also do want to mention to everybody here, we do have the chat that is opened up. So please throw any questions in there that you have as we go through this discussion. We're going to do our best to answer those things in real time as we kind of go through. We'll probably write some responses in the chat as we go through as well. And then obviously we'll have some time at the end to go through Q&A. And so I mentioned kind of the panel lineup that we have. The first person I want to introduce is Michelle, who is the VP of Global Sales Operations at AvePoint, which is a publicly traded company with over 1,300 employees all across the globe. Michelle started at AvePoint actually as an account executive, and over the last 10 years has moved on up in a variety of different roles. Now she's leading the sales ops team, and she has some specific experience and examples I mentioned that she's going to be sharing, and in ways that she's partnered with the finance office and with CFOs in the past. And fun fact about Michelle, she's an avid backpacker and skier. And one of the other things that I want to make sure that I mention is upfront is that since AvePoint is a publicly traded company, anything that Michelle says during this webinar is based on her own opinions, and it does not provide guidance on AvePoint's financial position. And I'm sure Michelle will probably reiterate that as well, but I want to make sure that I call that out. So Michelle, thank you for joining us and providing kind of your expertise here too. Next, I have Matt Sansoni, who is the Senior Director of Revenue Operations at Teleport. Matt has a very interesting background, obviously leading RevOps and sales ops, but he also has a background in finance and accounting. And so this particular topic of really bridging that gap and ensuring that you have the best partnership, we kind of have a 2-for-1 deal in Matt, since he'll be able to really speak to both elements of that. And fun fact about Matt is he actually spent 3 months in between jobs traveling throughout the state of California, sleeping in the woods. And so if you ever want, I don't know, maybe some survival advice or what it's like to spend 90 days on the road and sleeping in the woods, Matt is your guy, along with anything RevOps and sales ops, finance, accounting related. So Matt, thank you for joining us as well. And then last but certainly not least, I have Eyal Orgel, who is the CRO and co-founder at DealHub, a leading quote-to-revenue platform. And excited to have Eyal on the panel because he has, again, a unique position where, obviously, as leader of the revenue team, co-founder at DealHub, he needs to partner internally with finance and with his counterpart, his CFO. But he's also selling into folks in revenue operations. And so he hears a lot about their own challenges in getting approvals, how they partner with finance and with the CFO office. So lots of different perspectives that Eyal is going to be able to bring as well. And fun fact about Eyal is he's currently finishing up his paramotor licensing requirements, and so apparently does not have a fear of heights, unlike some of us on this panel. I'll just say me. So Eyal, thank you for.
Actually, I do. I just anything that's connected to the ground is no good. If it's just up in the air, it's fine. So
there you go. All right, and I guess. For me, I'm CEO and co-founder of RevOps Co-op. Again, for anyone here who's not a part of our community, RevOps Co-op is a free online community. We have 8,000 plus members from all across the globe who are passionate about revenue operations. You can kind of join our community, like I said, for free at RevOpsCoop.com. But that is not why we're here. We are here to talk about how RevOps can navigate the key pains of CFOs, and the first part that we want to get into, Eyal, are some of the survey results. So I've got the slide up here that talks about some of the essentially the priorities or the results, but I guess I want to turn it over to you. Talk a little bit about who you surveyed, how you surveyed them, how many of them were there, and some of the key things, I guess, are the top things that essentially kind of bubbled up to the top of their priority list.
Great. Well, first of all, let me just say thank you, Matt, for having us, and to Matt and Michelle for being with us today. Yeah, we did the survey back at it's going back several weeks ago, and basically, obviously, we're selling, and we want to know we're selling to organizations that have to get to the CFO at the end of the day, and what are the top priorities that are being looked at right now. So it's very timely. It's very meaningful for us to know what's going on right now. What are the CFOs looking at for the first half? Typically, we don't talk directly to the CFOs, but as we'll be talking about today, we are talking to the RevOps people that need to go to the CFOs, and at the end of the day, what is it that is their priorities? Of anything that was the most surprising from this survey is that the survey wasn't surprising, which was also surprising in that sense. I think that we're in a downturn right now, recession, however you want to call it, financial situation. It's always an interesting word, what we want to call it right now as well. You know, trying to stay away from different words to not make it sound worse than it is, but it is not that great out there right now. The same pains that we probably see all the time, all year round, are still there for the CFOs, at least, you know, according to the survey that we've done. They're still looking for getting better efficiency from the solutions that they're putting their money into. They want the consistency across all the different tools that they're implementing. Obviously, automation is definitely the thing they want to do. And I think together with this automation is the idea of also getting more out of the value that you're getting from your tools. So have things do a little bit more. Obviously, the pricing strategy is really key, and probably even, you know, we can imagine even a lot more important at this time when we've got a situation where we've got to be controlling our revenues. So we're looking at the pricing strategy and the fact that having the governance over all that's happening as well. They really want to have a lot of control. So like I said, it was surprising to see that it wasn't. What makes it a challenge, though, with this, and we'll be talking about a lot, and it'd be great to hear as well Michelle's case study in a minute, is that we're having to deal with these problems, or CFOs are dealing with these priorities, and we have to address them, whether I'm trying to sell into your organization or it's you as revenue operations people trying to talk to your CFO. They have the same priorities, but the funds just aren't necessarily there, or they've been cut. And now it's not just, these are their priorities, but if you want to get on that priority list, you've got to come with them with all the other solutions that they're looking at that they need to go and address this. And that's what makes it a very interesting time. So we're still trying to do everything that we wanted to do before, or they're trying to do. Everything that they wanted to do before, yet we've got a lot less of a pie to basically pass around to have all those different solutions that address all these different areas. So like I said, it was kind of a surprise that it was not a surprise, but then it surprised us that that was the case, that these are really, you know, makes it a much tougher time. And it's really interesting how we're having this conversation today, because I think these are really the issues that are being faced, again, from my side as a vendor trying to sell into customers, and also from you folks that are out there trying to work these priorities within your organization, taking these things up to your CFO. So that was basically the results. Like I said, these were just done several weeks ago. Actually, I don't have the numbers. We'll try to put it in the chat in a few minutes what the actual numbers of the CFOs that we talked to, but this was just several weeks ago, and these are basically what they're telling us at this moment.
Yeah. So the like you said, this all kind of makes sense, I guess, as I look at this, and maybe Matt, given the RevOps, sales ops, and kind of finance kind of overlap, question for you is, I guess the two things that at least jump out to me are the aspect of kind of control, and then I'll say pricing strategy. I thought, the thing I don't necessarily see here, which may have you may hear from other folks, is things like efficient growth, right, or revenue growth, right? But we're talking more about pricing. So I guess maybe the first thing is control. And Eyal, you probably have some perspective on this too. But Matt, like for you, what does that mean if you can put on like the finance part of your brain along with the RevOps part of your brain? Like, is it control over kind of tools? Like, what does that aspect mean? I guess for folks here. And you're on mute as well, Matt.
If you follow it all the way to the end point where you're looking at, okay, what are they trying to control for? That, to me, that says audit. They're looking at, okay, how do we pass a financial audit and make sure that everything is accurate? And that goes all the way through revenue recognition and how they apply that guidance to those different line items, right? So that's the tail end of this. If you go upstream, what does that mean in Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using? And it really comes down to SKU management, right? Like a lot of early startups, they don't have any sort of SKU management in place. They don't have different start dates, end dates at the SKU level. And so getting a tool or getting something in place that goes, okay, here are your SKUs, here's how you manage those SKUs, and then here's how that SKU management flows all the way through to your revenue recognition and then your audit. So that to me is what control means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess kind of related to call it process control, which I guess also ties into the consistency aspect a little bit. But Michelle, what's your take on I guess some of these kind of key drivers that at least in surveying a bunch of different CFOs, all in the Deal Hub crew have seen? I guess, do any of these resonate or kind of hit home for you?
Yeah, most of them do. And I think the first one that sticks out to me to speak to is going to be the pricing strategy, and then consistency and automation are right there along with that. So when I look at pricing strategy, I look at that on two sides of the coin. I look at it from the buying side of the coin, and I look at it from the selling side as well. So in my role, unique in the RevOps community is we kind of sit on the both, right? We sit on purchasing software and making these purchasing decisions, but we're also right there in the field with the sellers, making sure that they're selling our product as well. So that's what I kind of look at when I see the pricing strategy. So on that, one thing that I'll kind of speak on for both of them is the value in growing your implementation. So typically you can expect a lower kind of initial price to get in the door with your customers. And how do you get in the door and then grow with them as well? So how does your pricing strategy actually evolve over the course of a contract, in the course of either being a customer or having a customer? So that's kind of very broad and high level on the pricing strategy, but that kind of key takeaway there is implementing and seeing the success there, and then growing as you continue over the contract. And then when I come over to the consistency one for a moment too, on that side, it's being able to have that consistent conversation that is always the same, so that you have the same standards, that you're not talking to one customer or buyer and having a different conversation and then having to redo your baseline every time. So it's having that baseline that creates predictable kind of metrics there. And then automation is everything needs to be automated these days. People don't have a lot of time to be doing a lot of manual tasks. So anything that we can do to automate manual tasks is going to be really big in both buying and selling. So again, speaking throughout this whole webinar today on both the buying and the selling side of things.
Yeah, makes sense. And I guess in hearing what y'all had to say, kind of I guess the two things that pop to mind, at least for me, are essentially, one is operational excellence, right? And I think that kind of encompasses the efficiency, consistency, automation, and even control aspect of this. And I think pricing strategy is, like you said, Michelle, all around kind of land and expand, but essentially also like retain like the customers that you have, right? Do what you can to generate new business. Understand that you may not be getting say 100% of maybe the revenue that you want on day one or from that initial deal, but deliver value, have a successful implementation, make a great first impression, and understand that as a software company, you are looking to kind of retain and expand your customers kind of as you go along. So makes complete sense. So I guess on that note, Michelle, we kind of talked about how to, I guess we brought it up at the beginning, how to build a successful, kind of business case. And you mentioned it, right? Recession, downturn, different economic climate, right? Like, I'll let whoever's out there, like, fill in whatever term you want to call it, right? But let's just say things are more challenging now than they have been in the past. And so when it comes to, kind of building essentially a business case for your RevOps projects or initiatives, Michelle, this is something you've gone through kind of previously. And so we've got some slides on kind of how you kind of laid these things out and structured them. And so, maybe at first, before we get into kind of the stuff that's on here, maybe just give us like an overview of or a backdrop, kind of some context, set the stage for folks in terms of kind of what we're going to be discussing, and then I'll kind of go to the next slide and we can start to talk through some of the specifics.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. Thanks for teeing that up, Matt. So I've been buying technology for about 7 or so years now. And as we've been talking about this whole thing, the landscape has changed quite a bit. So because of the economy, companies are really starting to sharpen their pencils, but the goal isn't necessarily just to cut spending, but it's really to spend wisely. So in prior years, spending maybe didn't take as much scrutiny. So there was a little of an explosion, I would say, in buying software. Now with kind of where we're coming to and the corner that we're turning right now, it's actually taking a look at that software, again, with that more scrutiny, different levels of approval, different eyes on it all. And it's looking at the software that you already may have in-house and the software that you don't have yet, and then determining what makes the most business sense. So vendor selection is going to be really important, obviously. So you need a strong business case to be able to sell internally, as I call it, to determine if something is really worth that investment or not. So then I have some other notes too that we'll go into when we hop over to the business case slide. So what we're going to go over is a little bit about how I take that spin of being from a sales background and put that onto my purchasing. So again, call it selling internally, always selling, and using our sales methodology in reverse to then pitch this to be able to buy something. So I think we can hop over to the next one unless we have any more thoughts from the crew here that want to jump in.
Yeah, I love I think I love the I guess I love the comparison of to sales or selling. I think the thing that's often forgotten is that regardless of who you are, whether you're an account executive or in any other role, you are constantly selling something, right? You're selling yourself, you're selling your idea, you're selling the need for a new tool. So you can't shy away from that fact. And I think the other thing is any software company, any company that you currently work at, right? Like you're selling a product. So your team has a methodology, a way that they sell effectively. Use that as a resource for yourself in terms of how you can sell internally back to those same people that are ultimately going to be approving your projects, right? You don't need to go out and recreate the wheel. There's tons of resources that you have available. Start with that, right? And so I love that example, Michelle. And I guess talk about, I know we're obviously going to go through, I think, like some of the methodology that you have here, which I think is on the left side of the screen. And then I know you've got some specific examples on kind of a specific kind of business case that you put together for needing a new piece of technology. But I guess maybe walk us through, I don't know, the left side of the screen, or at least for me, it's the left side of the screen, but the kind of the questions to answer essentially, and kind of why those are what they are and how folks can approach that.
Yep, definitely. So for any of those who are familiar with a force management methodology or MEDPIC, you've probably heard that there's a million methodologies out there. This is part of MedPick. I just, from a buyer perspective, rearranged it actually a little bit for my internal business cases. So the pain, right? And I'm going to try to not read down the list of questions here, but these are all a take home that everybody could use. But what is that pain, and how long has that pain been going on? What have you tried to do to fix it already? Why didn't that work? And what happens if we don't fix it? So getting that pain up front is really, really important to understand why we even need to be looking at a solution. When I talked about that explosion of technology purchases in the past, the pain didn't have to be that painful to be able to buy something. It was just, this is a pain. All right, let's slap a solution on it. Now that pain has to be very painful for you to get that money to be able to spend back. So starting with that pain and really focusing around what are we fixing actually? So there's pain, but how bad is that pain? Then making sure that you have metrics and hard KPIs and dollar amounts in a resolution of what you're going to solve. So where do I expect to be after I solve this? And how much better is it going to be than my current state? So when we get over to the right-hand side of the screen, we'll talk about what your current challenges are, your future state, but your future state should also have, we don't have in this example, but your future state should have dollar values assigned to all of those, or metrics at least assigned to those. Because of this future state, I'm going to either increase my top line or decrease my bottom line. So that hard metrics is really important too. Then we get into the grouping of kind of the technology fit and the user fit. So these are going to be must-haves really, is does this integrate with our current systems on a technology side? I know we were joking before this webinar that there's a lot of Google shops and Slack shops out there, but there's also folks like me who are very used to the Microsoft world. So also making sure that you have vendors that are supporting the environment that you're in this case, a Microsoft environment. Does it also flow to your other technologies? A lot of folks on this phone might use like a NetSuite, for instance, as well for their invoicing and processing. Does everything flow into that system correctly to be able to spit down your end-to-end? You don't want to get yourself in a hairy situation down the road where you have this piece of technology that doesn't integrate with anything and you're left kind of Frankensteining solutions together. That one is really huge and sometimes overlooked on what that overall technology fit is actually going to be and how that works.
Yeah, I've heard
Yeah.
from so many people that they, kind of, I'll say, easy to forget about that one. And especially, during the sales or like evaluation process, it may sound obvious. Don't forget that you have to implement the technology, right? You can't just magically drop it in and be like, oh, voila, I'm able to get value. Let's do this thing. So don't forget about the implementation process and the fact that does require work, and you need a successful implementation to drive a lot of the value that you're ultimately gonna get.
Yeah. And also making sure you have the right expertise and knowledge to do that. So just stemming off what you were saying there, Matt, is do I have somebody that can actually make the technology fit? Maybe there is some API calls that have to be set up. Do we have somebody that can actually make those API calls? A user fit. So does this integrate with our users day to day? Is it a culture fit? Some people may not think of that as like a culture fit when you're buying technology, but it is actually quite impactful, because if your users don't adopt the technology, then it goes out the window real fast, and then that software is not going to be renewed in the next year. And so depends if you're kind of user facing on that one. But what is the learning curve for folks on that, on the user fit? Then coming down a little bit on the decision process, understanding when you want to be live, and then going through what that work back schedule is going to look like. So it ties up into some of the stuff above here, but made sure to put that one on there as well of who else is involved in the decision making. And this one is getting tough for people who even have been buying technology for a while. At the kind of C-level, higher org level, they're introducing more kind of procurement processes and ways and more levels that you may not even know about. So it's also important for us to expand who we're even talking to internally when buying software and getting multiple stakeholders involved. So that's something that I like to do to make sure that I'm not talking to just my boss, but if my boss has a boss, or if there's counterparts, or if there's different departments, getting a general kind of buy-in from other departments is also going to strengthen the business case, because then it's not just one person being the champion for this. It's actually building like a community of champions within your organization to support that business case. So when it comes up in different meetings, maybe the CS team is having a meeting, or the legal team is having a meeting, seeding some of these technology purchases to those people too can make it come up in, water cooler talk or the virtual water cooler that we have there.
I would just add to that, there are certain softwares that are very cross-functional. And when you come across that kind of cross-functional project, if you're not getting buy-in initially, and then also getting that buy-in throughout the implementation, and then getting buy-in when you go live, like you need to continually be reselling these decisions throughout the entire life cycle for it to be successful. So like that I can't overstate the importance of that cross-functional buy-in when you're doing this.
Yeah, especially Matt and Michelle, you were hitting on this, is like, I mean, like you said, Matt, essentially any RevOps software is, inherently is going to be cross-functional, spread across a variety of different teams. And also, to Michelle's point, like you can't be in every single meeting where this is going to get talked about. And so you need to sell initially internally to a variety of different stakeholders on a variety of different teams. You need to continuously resell. You need to build that kind of collective yes, so that those folks can ultimately, sell for you, right? When they're in those meetings, when this gets brought up, when someone brings up that they have this specific problem and like, oh, well, we've got this current project that we're evaluating in flight that can solve that, right? Like those, that's the value from things like that, because again, you can't be everywhere, and you need to build that consensus across a variety of different groups.
Definitely. So then it comes down to the paper process. So on the seller side, sellers love to forget this one, but this then ends up being quite a hurdle and quite a tricky one sometimes. There's the sales cycle, and then there's the paper process cycle. So this one, from a kind of internal buyer perspective, should always be started as upfront as you really can. You have to kind of go through the vendor selection and the competition, which we'll get to next. But what do you have to do for legal contract reviews? A lot of software now is a SaaS, so software as a service, that has more of a cybersecurity kind of questionnaire, security review type processes, that those things can be quite timely. Also making sure you kind of understand who on your team internally is going to do that. So is there somebody in legal that maybe you can build a relationship with to help you push things along? Because the legal team has a stack of things to review on their desk. How do you kind of make yours kind of bump up, which goes back to the pain that you're solving and the importance of that pain as well, to kind of make sure that your project gets put up there a little bit. Same thing with the cybersecurity questionnaire. Do you have a team, a kind of set of standards that you have to answer for security questionnaires? For new purchasers, they might forget these things and just say, oh, this is the solution in the software that I need. But once you kind of gone through that experience over and over and over again, you understand how long legal and security can really take. So can't stress those ones.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anybody has recent experience with those to talk to on that one, but those ones for me are really big.
I feel like
I have a lot, as I'm always selling, but definitely it is there, and we're seeing even more and more requirements for reviewing security, deeper analysis on the vendors and all that. So it's definitely become, even before the situation now, it's always been, for the last 12 months, I've seen it just increasing more and more.
Yeah.
I too feel like security has gotten a lot more intense in the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
Like 3 years ago, you could go out and just throw a credit card down, buy a tool, and they didn't care at all. And maybe I said, I'm not part of that world, and just get maybe GDPR is intensified, or there's some other things, but security has become very painful. Like it's a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I think the last one on here, Michelle, was around kind of competition,
so
right? And looking at
on
other
that one.
alternatives.
So this is making sure that you are evaluating multiple vendors as well, because if you put all of your eggs in one basket on a vendor and then you pop up to your CFO, you're like, here, we selected them, we're going with this one, and they're like, who else did you look at? So don't turn a blind eye to making sure that you're looking at multiple people from multiple angles, and also having some type of scorecard that matters to you. I think the scorecard is a very fair way of looking at things, engaging things. So coming back to that kind of consistency, I know that's not what the question was about, but having consistency for yourself in scoring and evaluating these different vendors and these different competition. And there's nuances that can obviously be added that, but for instance, the very main ones are, how do they compare in price, functionality, system integration? And one that I actually didn't write on here that is really important is that culture fit again, and of that vendor to your company. So is this vendor somebody that I'm going to be able to rely on and maybe think about as an extension of my team? Or are they somebody that doesn't really get your business? They're there to just kind of sell you something and leave. You need to make sure that that fit is really well. So that's a huge checkbox for me, is that general fit as well, and making sure that somebody's there to help you with implementation, but really also growing. So is that vendor looking at updating their roadmap consistently, or are they kind of the status quo, just trying to keep up with the basic functionality? Or do they have that baseline functionality that meets your needs, but really their long-term growth plan is to grow with you as a partnership? So really thinking about that partnership and not just a transaction.
Yeah. And I guess, Eyal, one of the questions for you, I mean, Michelle kind of laid out how she borrowed this from the like the sales side. I guess as a CRO, a seller, how does this framework kind of compare to the way that you all operate, to the way that you sell, right, to customers? I'm just curious to know, like, what's your perspective on that?
Well, definitely, these are all things that we go through. I think pretty much all of them. So actually, we use very similar methodologies in our sales process. So yeah, the salespeople are going through this process and validating. I think one of the things that's not on here that we face today is also, I guess from the vendor side of things, looking at is the customer getting value, and when are they going to get value? And especially in a time like this, what we're finding with the CFOs is that they're looking at solutions. Basically, there's a lot of solutions. A lot of vendors are coming in with these processes or very similar methodologies and all that coming in, and everybody's trying to sell. And obviously, you as RevOps people in the audience are looking to put in a lot of different kinds of solutions. And one of the things we've really found is that the way some of the methods that the CFOs are looking at which tools to put in is what's getting me the value the soonest. And it's not quite listed on there, but it's hidden within there, is that coming and providing a solution that is going to provide value in the shortest amount of time. Budgets that obviously are really tight, but they're looking at where can I put out budget that's going to be giving me something back, and how fast can I get that return on value. So definitely, as part of the sales process, it's also looking at what can we provide, how fast is that organization going to get value from it, and that's helping to put some of those decisions, because really all the tools are needed that RevOps are looking at, but it's going to be a priority based off of how big that pie is, what's going to come in. So it's really important to look at that. So that's a really key thing that we're seeing, is in addition to all this, is how do we go and show that we can provide that really short-term value, in addition to obviously the longer-term value that needs to be gained from that solution as well.
Yep. And I know kind of before we get into the other part of the slide here, Michelle, with your specific example, I know the other thing, as I was kind of listening to you walk through this on the metrics side, at least that resonated with me was in my previous role, I was VP of business operations at a growing software startup. So I kind of wore this finance and RevOps hat as well. And there were a lot of times when folks would come to me and they'd be like, hey, I need this, I need to buy a gifting platform tool. Right. And it's like, because they wanted to send, there was like one use case for like sending gifts out to to customers. But the first question that I would always ask them, because the company I was at, we were building OKR software. So we had OKRs as our kind of goal planning framework, right? It was like, what OKR is this going to help us execute on? Like tie it back to a company goal or objective, which can be revenue growth, customer love, right? Like whatever it is, but like understand the things that are important to the company for that particular quarter, year, chunk of 6 months, whatever it is, right? And, you know, tie those quantitative or qualitative things in your business case to those goals or objectives, because that draws a very clear line of sight to project A is going to help me execute on this company goal, this company objective. So yeah, makes tons of sense. And I guess maybe on the other part that you had here, Michelle, I guess kind of walk us through kind of the specific example, I think around kind of a new kind of quoting tool, CPQ solution that you were looking for. But I guess like start with the challenges, right? Like how did you identify maybe step one, right? The pain, right? Like what were the problems, the things that you were experiencing? How did you know that you needed some sort of solution to help?
Yeah. So I'm not going to read through all of these, but I'll talk to them generally. And it was, you know, this was one slide from our overall business case that had all of these other pieces in there. But it was going through our challenges that our sellers were generally just spending a lot of time configuring quotes. So I'll actually go to on the right side, the future state, but we had these high paid sales teams that were spending so much time figuring out what they were quoting, what approval process they needed to go through if they wanted to offer a discount, what offerings were they selling? Because if there's a product line of like 30 products, what is it actually that I'm packaging together? What makes the most kind of sense and fit? How do I bundle? How do I package? And that was kind of on the sales side where they were spending so much time in administrative work and again, engineering quotes that we needed to cut down a lot of that time to give them time back to selling. So the metric that drives back to is our revenue number and giving more time to sellers to actually sell. And then the bottom line there, or the bottom kind of area in the chart is more related to the back end, is you needed to have a special type of individual that had CRM, Microsoft Dynamics CRM development skills to then build, update, and maintain the system, where we were looking for something that was less reliant on a specific role, a specific set of developer skills, and looking for more of a no-code integration, not requiring a specific skill set. So that was kind of the business case that we had, and looking at that future state that was going to give us guidance selling so that quotes would go out quickly. Again, using those high paid resources for revenue generating activities instead of administrative work. Having those different audit trails available for the approvals and knowing where to go so things flow through, had a better flow through our system overall. So
yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, high level, you had like you said, highly paid sales team that, I guess, to tie it back to the CFO kind of results we had before, efficiency, weren't operating efficiently, meaning a lot of their time was being spent on non-sales related activities. I guess the other thing that I see on here is also, and probably ties back to the efficiency and a little bit on the automation stuff too, is team of developers, or essentially people on your team that were needed to maintain the current process, the current systems that you had in place. So basically just a lot of people hours that were getting thrown at kind of the pricing, quoting kind of process, right? Whether it was tools, systems, or just things that had to get done. So what I guess talked a little bit about it, but so what were some of the, if those were the pains, what were some of the like the metrics? Like walk us through the thought process of how you went from those pain points to specific kind of metrics in dollars. Like, did you walk it through all the way of like, okay, if I've got this high paid sales team, they're spending X number of hours every single week on these kind of manual non-selling related activities, their time is worth Z dollars, so X times Z is equal to Y. Like, what else was in there, and kind of how do you think about that on the metric side?
Yeah, I would say that was the main formula that we used, was the amount of time back to then give them, definitely the main driver there.
And was there anything on the pricing side, or I guess the kind of the pricing strategy? Again, that was like one of the things that at least seemed to be like a top priority for CFOs in the first half of this year, or was it mostly focused on, again, the manual kind of intervention and process for you all?
Mostly the manual intervention of that. Have to look back because I don't have it top of my head right now, but
yeah. And what I guess, Matt or y'all, as kind of Michelle walks through again, like the current challenges before we get to the future state of this particular kind of business case, I guess, how does this resonate with you? I mean, you're obviously talking to folks about kind of these problems every single day, but Matt, you're kind of living them, at least within kind of teleport on, again, the RevOps side. So yeah, like, how do these things, I guess, align with maybe some of the challenges that you're either seeing out there or that you're experiencing firsthand?
Yeah, I could definitely chime in. I'd love the use of MedPick in trying to sell software internally. I think it's really solid. As far as like going to future state and current challenges, there is for us internally at Teleport, there are a lot of the KPIs and metrics are hard to measure, as y'all were kind of pointing out, like sales rep efficiency. Yes, that's there. But what about sales order form errors or different inconsistencies in the data, or like not having an approval process that's robust, so that you're like, there are so many different elements to a CPQ implementation, right? That it's hard to say that one thing is going to get solved and that's enough to put it over the hump. And right now in the current climate, I would say this: the future state is probably more of a thing to look towards, right? Like as we all know that we're selling less software right now. Things are tighter, right? Which makes internal purchases harder. But what you can really point to is like, now is probably a great time to build that operational efficiency and operational excellence. So when things do thaw, and we're all in the mindset that it will thaw, that's where you are moving to, right? That's your future state. Is when things come back, we want everything to be bulletproof, ready to go, so it can scale when the time comes. Yeah.
And on that note, I guess maybe, for all of you, whoever wants to kind of respond first, talk about the kind of the short-term versus the long-term, call it evaluation process, right? Like if you're building out these metrics, for example, like we talked about the one before, Michelle, of like take, hours spent times an hourly rate to get like total dollars saved, right? But how can folks communicate that to say a CFO or the finance office in terms of long term, right? Is that like, let's spread that out over the next 12 months, the next 24 months? Like, how can you really drive home that, hey, this isn't like a one and done thing? To Ayal's point, time to value, you're going to get realized quickly. But how can we also demonstrate the long term, kind of value add that comes with these projects and initiatives?
Maybe I'll take a stab at that, but I'll take it from a slightly different direction. What we're talking with a lot of the folks that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, they've got all those pains right now, those challenges now, and they know if they're not going to get them solved now, they're still going to have to solve them in the future. And that's one of the difficulties or the challenges they have. I wouldn't say the difficulty they're having is getting that message to the CFO, but that's the challenge they have, is that those pains are not going to go away. They're just going to get even larger because they're going to continue. Yeah. So Your salespeople aren't efficient now, they're also not going to be efficient later on. So maybe you should be dealing with it now and not waiting for later on. If your discounts are not getting approved properly at this point, just looking at, the things that Michelle has on here, they're definitely not going to be, dealt with properly in the future, but you're going to be losing a lot of money along the way if you got leakage in that area. So a lot of these things have to be looked at, that there are immediate short-term, it goes even together with, like I said, the value that you can get very quickly. But these problems are not going to go away, and you're just going to have a lot more loss over time if you don't deal with them. So in this case, we may be talking specifically about CPQ, but other solutions that you may have as well, you've got to look at. And then goes back to, how are you getting that as the one thing that the CFO is going to go look at as opposed to another tool? But obviously that's another challenge, but these pains are not going to go away. You've got to deal with them now for the short term, because they're still going to be there for the long term. And it's just going to compound in terms of the effect.
Yeah. And I was gonna hit on that last point, of like, they're not going to go away, but they're only going to get worse. They're certainly not going to get better, but they're also not going to stay the same. They're going to get more painful, right? And so that's like why really drive that home. It comes into the first step here of what Michelle laid out, of like, identify that pain, right? And just like really try to like push home on that, and the fact that, like, hey, this is what we're experiencing today. But make sure that you also put it through the lens of like, it's not going to get better. It's also not going to stay the same. It's just going to get worse if we don't do something to fix it now.
Yeah, and one other thing that we're seeing a lot of customers responding to is that when we're coming to talk about a solution, is don't maybe try to tackle all those problems in one shot. Go out in a phased approach. Take a look at what you can break that down, because you may be able to use the same solution to deal with a number of different things. If you try to deal with all the pains in one shot, that's going to lengthen the project. It's going to you need a lot more approvals that we talked about earlier, a lot more people that have to go through and all that process. But if you can get things out in, oftentimes what works for us very nicely going to customers is say, hey, go out in a phased approach, get part of the problem solved, start building on that. It also helps internally, because one of the things, as you're selling the solution, you want to be able to show value back into the organization. That's going to give you that backing, that the wind beneath your wings that you're going to need to keep that process going. And then you're going to get to those other things. So really looking at things in a phased approach and not just a big bang, we're going to get it all done. Big bang projects are great. They're just going to take you a year to do it, and you're not going to get it approved. Get something that can go out in chunks. You're going to get a lot more approval. It's a lot easier to get it going. And you're going to see that the momentum will build internally as people accept it and get value out of it. So it's something that's really worked very well for us in helping our RevOps people going and taking that to their management.
Yeah, I think that's a huge takeaway. I just want to kind of underline that one again, is that small chunk in that building up, because anytime I've tried to do a big bang project, typically, I don't want to say falls flat, but when I compare my big bang projects to my kind of like hill builds, if I will, I never used that term before, but now I did. But building up on that
it's on record now.
Yeah, right. I'm into climbing here. But those are usually much more successful and create that momentum for that bigger purchase and that bigger success for the longer term, for sure.
Yeah, and I think it ties back to the time to value aspect that they all mentioned, right? Like, like find, maybe to tie this all together, find the first hill that you want to climb, right? Hopefully it's not a combination of all of those hills, right? It's not a mountain, but find the first hill, right? Demonstrate how you can get there quickly and how that can deliver like tons of value and ROI, and then demonstrate how you can attack those other areas and go one after the other. And actually, so Michelle, I guess to wrap up this slide, we talked about like the I guess the evaluation process that you went through and how you specifically laid out some of the current challenges, how you identified those pains, those metrics, kind of the questions to answer. Talk about, I guess, the future state for this particular kind of decision on the quoting side. So how did you, and maybe related back to some of the things we talked about already, how quickly did it take you to kind of go through the decision process, the paper process, the vendor evaluation process, and then once you made your choice, time to value, what did that look like, and how long did it take you to maybe get to this future state that you have kind of laid out here?
Yeah. Buying cycle was probably about a year, and I would say a lot of the paper process was probably the biggest piece of it. So it's going through those vendor evaluations and everything that I laid out earlier. And then as new kind of levels of approval were getting added to changing landscapes, about a year overall. And then implementation 2 is say about 6 months. And then, so we were able to recognize some of those quick wins fairly early on. And then again, continuing that climbing the hill aspect of layering different things in. So with the software like this, it does take those multiple departments that Matt S was talking about earlier, of getting that buy-in for the future functionality as well, for things that the legal team are going to then be affected by, things that we need to loop the marketing team on. So I started seeding these things well in advance and during the purchasing cycle as well. So that implementation, it was no new surprise to people of like, oh, we bought this software, and people are like, what? So making sure that like people through the buying process that are going to be implementing are roughly up to speed, whether that's typically what I did is typically do it at the heads of the department and then roughly one below them to kind of get that out. So now we're building upon those different areas here that are involving those different departments.
Yeah, that's great. And I guess Eyal or Matt, anything to add on some of the kind of the information on this slide before we get to some of the kind of the wrap up stuff and some of the other kind of questions that we've got?
I was going to put you on the spot, but no, I think we talked about most of the key things here that yeah, pretty typical things that we're seeing from customers as well, looking at those current states, looking at their future states and trying to help them. And I think, like I said, already talked about, you know, getting that approach to getting it done. It's really, really helpful.
Yep.
A lot of the conversation has been around CPQ, and I think rightly so, right? It's like kind of like a RevOps Deal Hub kind of mix. And I'll say that I've implemented CPQ twice now in my life, and it is never like an easy, just like, it's just not easy. And again, I'm going to go back to that collaboration bit. You have finance people and sales people trying to get them both to align on a strategy, a solution, how you're doing it. Do not forget that those part, like you've got to pull everyone along and collaborate and resell consistently in that process. And that's the big thing I keep coming back to. It's like if you got them to agree to buy the software, great. You also have to get them to agree to implement the software. It is, and that is a second round of selling. And then you have to agree that it's the right time to go live. That's another round of selling. Like the whole thing is it's a process.
Yep. I bet you didn't know that you'd be a big salesperson when you went into RevOps, right? But you are very much. So I guess so actually on that, Matt, I mean, one of the things you mentioned with like a CPQ or even like a quoting type of tool or solution, I mean, you hit on, I guess, some of these things that Eyal mentioned, and maybe that's maybe the last question that I'll tee up for folks here before we kind of move on is like what types of RevOps projects align nicely with these priorities, right? Like, you know, the folks that are, you know, now have a big say in everything, right? CFO, the finance office, as you look at efficiency, consistency, control, pricing, strategy, automation, what are those types of kind of RevOps projects, initiatives, areas, if you will, that, you know, corresponds nicely with the things here on the screen? And Matt, maybe if you don't mind kind of getting us started, like what are the things that come to mind for you?
I'm gonna take Michelle's term here, small hills, or yeah, there are some small hills that are really great that kind of fit a lot of these boxes. Picking a really good enrichment provider, and I'm thinking about ZoomInfo, Clearbit, easy win, easy to integrate, does a lot to help with all of these things like consistent HQ address information, consistent parent hierarchy in Salesforce, and that like drives segmentation, which then drives pricing and control. So picking a good enrichment provider early on and implementing that, it's a nice little small hill for you. CPQ is the biggest hill. There's no doubt in my mind about that one. Like when you think about a tool that covers every single one of these boxes and is also like takes the most amount of effort and collaboration to go live, CPQ is that's a mountain. You ready for it? It's absolutely a necessity. Everyone has to do it, but it's just like that's where that sits. Other little small hills like commission software tool, like there's a lot out there, like Spiff, Captivate, Exactly, Verisent. I've used all of them, implemented all of them. They all have their pros and cons, you know, like figure out which one works for you. So that's like a nice little medium-sized hill, maybe. They're depending on your comp plans, right? Yeah, but there's
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Hey, all, Michelle, what about you? What comes to mind?
So I'll let you take it from the RevOps side, otherwise I'll just say CPQ.
Yeah, so I think I liked how Matt put that of some of the small and medium hills. Another one is something like an outreach, literally the vendor outreach, but outreach is another one in the RevOps community, and making sure that you have the ability to, again, scale your sellers' time to make sure that they're kind of task management in the way that they're doing outreach. It's funny, the vendor name is also what the activity is. But something like that is really good too. And that hits on the ones of the consistency, the control, and the automation, also in efficiency. Not really much on the pricing strategy area with something like outreach, but it does hit on those 4 other boxes of making our sellers more efficient, automated, consistent in what they're messaging, and being able to control that overall too.
Yeah. And that's a good example of, you know, again, a couple of different ways that you can, you know, kind of look at efficiency, right? There's obviously, you know, in terms of time split between things like, you know, selling and non-selling related activities, but then there's also things like number of accounts, number of prospects that, you know, one person can, you know, can hit or reach out to, right? And so, you know, lots of different ways to evaluate that as well. And then, yeah, you know, all you mentioned CPQ. I mean, we all mentioned CPQ. You know, certainly, you know, I think if you look at that in total, obviously a very, you know, kind of big category tool system, right? But I also think lots of, again, small hills that you can kind of climb to get there. And I think that is the one aspect that hits on really all of these things that I look at on the screen, from efficiency, consistency, automation, control. That's what I bucket into that kind of operational excellence piece. And obviously pricing and strategy, the ability to not only let you generate more new business, right, but to land and expand, like we kind of talked about at the beginning, but also retain, right? Renew the customers that that you currently have. You can't expand a customer if you don't keep them around, right? And you need to land them if you want a shot at, you know, at continuing to serve them. So, you know, that's obviously a huge aspect here as well. But with that, I know we're kind of at time. We're about a minute over or so. So I will kind of let everyone run. Also want to let everybody know the folks at Deal Hub will follow up afterwards with some assets. We'll continue our conversation in Slack, and the RevOps Club Slack group as well. And then obviously you can hit up all of us on the panel on LinkedIn as well. Any kind of questions, we'll make sure to kind of respond to as well after this. And so Matt, Eyal, Michelle, thank you very much for participating today. All of the attendees, thank you for joining us as well. I will let you all run. Thanks again for joining, and I'll see you all on the flip side. Take care, everybody.
appreciate you having me.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.